Hey guys, it's County, and this is going to be for the second half of my very elongated and, like I said, much needed catch-up review for the end of the year. I got a lot of movies to go through this time around. Like I said, I wanted to get the Netflix ones out of the way, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a lot to go over. There's about 40 films that I'm going to go over in just this one video alone, so I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible with most of these films, because while I do have stuff to say about a good majority of them, there's quite a few that I've kind of forgotten about, but there are some here that I really do love a lot, and, similar to the other one, I just didn't, maybe I just didn't have time to review them or something like that. They're not all just, like, disposable films that I didn't have much to say about. Some of these are just films that I simply just did not have time to do a longer review for, but either way, guys, got a lot to go into here, so we're just going to start off with the first one. So, similar to my Netflix catch-up review, this is a movie that I meant to talk about in my last catch-up review that I did, but unlike See You Yesterday, I didn't even record anything for this one. Like, I realized after I published the video, fuck, I forgot to talk about Nancy Drew and The Hidden Staircase. But now it's gotten to a point where I watched this back in, like, May or something like that, and I've just completely forgotten about this film. Like, I really don't have much to say about it, other than this essentially feels like a Disney Channel film that somehow ended up in theaters. I wouldn't even say, like, a Nickelodeon one. It feels very, very Disney Channel. There are many moments in this movie where it feels like something you would see on the Disney Channel. Even Sophia Lillis, who I normally really do like, isn't doing that great of a job here. She does her, I think she's doing, there are points where she definitely does seem into it, but just overall, I didn't think she did particularly a lot to really stand out here. As a film, it's just kind of what you're expecting it to be. It's very schlocky. It's very much, like I said, feels like a Disney Channel film, and there's a reason why it wasn't in theaters for very long. From what I remember, it was in my theater for, like, I want to say no longer than like a week. Like, it was gone before it even, it was basically gone before it even entered theaters, pretty much. Like, that's the best way to sum it up. This is just a really stupid film overall. It also is one of the worst performances, I think, not of the year, but definitely it was one of the worst of the year, from Laura Slade Wiggins. I've never really liked this actress. I didn't like her in Shameless and things like that. And here, they try really hard to make you believe that this girl's a teenager. This girl is, I believe, like, in her 40s, and they still try to make you believe that she's actually a teenager, and that in itself is pretty hilarious. Look, Sam Tramiel is pretty good here for what he has, but overall, this is just a really dumb kids film that honestly should have never come to theaters. This is really just a film that should have been direct to DVD all along. There's a reason why it was only in theaters for like a week, and yeah, so not really much to say about this one. D for Nancy Drew and The Hidden Staircase. Really stupid film overall. The Hustle is all kinds of awful. This is easily one of the most obnoxious comedies that I've seen all year. I really couldn't stand this one. Oh, look, I'm not usually one to really hate on Rebel Wilson, but this is maybe the worst she's ever been. She's really just here to make fun of her weight, make fun of the fact that she's, not the most attractive woman and things like that, and they just, all of her jokes are pretty much the same. They're obnoxious, they're over the top, and I really couldn't stand her in this movie. Now look, Anne Hathaway is definitely the better of the two. I think she did the best with what she had for sure, even though her accent is not really the greatest, but you can definitely tell that she is enjoying this. She definitely is a more experienced actress. That's not the problem with this movie. The problem with this movie is that there is no chemistry between these two really at all, and that's very unfortunate because, again, I don't usually hate Rebel Wilson all that much, but just you put these two together, their comedy styles do not work. You have Anne Hathaway, who is far more snarky, and she's doing some, and then you have Rebel Wilson, who is almost entirely relying on physical comedy, and they just do not blend together really at all here. Where the film ends up going is completely preposterous, especially where they go with Alex Sharp's character. Absolutely ridiculous. I couldn't believe what they ended up doing there. He comes across as a really big idiot until a certain twist happens, and then you kind of realize why he is. But yeah, this one's just, it's really annoying. It's another comedy that I don't necessarily, remember, but it's one that I remember enough to the point where it annoyed me, and it's definitely one of the worst comedies of the year for sure. D for The Hustle. Again, not much to say, but overall, just really annoying stuff. All right, here comes a few hot takes I know you guys really love. I am not a fan of Gasper Know, very much at all. I went into Climax, before seeing his other films, kind of excited. It looked different. It looked like it was going to be very avant-garde. It looked like something that could really be right up my alley. But, and in preparation, I decided that me and another friend, we were going to watch on Rabbit all of his films. We were going to go through his filmography, and I came out only really appreciating one of them. Almost every film that this man has done, I fucking hate. And look, I'm not one to shit on art house directors. I always appreciate the fact that that directors try to do something different and that they aren't afraid to push the boundaries in that way. The problem with Gasper Know for me is that I feel like a lot of it is just it comes across as very sort of gratuitous, and it comes across as something that is just kind of grotesque to be that way. Like, it doesn't really have much more of a purpose than that. He doesn't really jive well with me. And I will say this, Climax is definitely, I think, one of his better efforts. It's a film, though, that I do respect more than I actually do like, because I get what this film is trying to do. It's trying to portray the very severe side effects of LSD, what this can do to a person, things like that. And there are some scenes that are very effective. One, especially, involving this mother and son. I don't want to say much more of that, but holy shit, it was one of the most disturbing things that I saw all year. And here's the thing. What works about that scene for me is that you don't even actually see what happens. It's just something that you kind of infer, and you kind of think about what this character did, and it's just horrifying to think about. And that's a big part of this movie, is just seeing how careless these characters have become because they're on this LSD and things like that. And I think, again, there are some sequences that are pretty effective, but then there's a point in this movie that I really don't like at all. A lot of it feels very tedious. The first half especially, I almost hated. We very quickly, in the first 10 minutes, get these very rushed introductions of each character, just talking about why they dance and things like that. And that's not a problem for me. I don't have a problem with a film very quickly going through characters. My problem is they're so quick to the point where nobody sticks out to you. They just happen one after the other, and I didn't find myself caring about anyone here. I didn't find a single character to really latch onto. And look, maybe that's the point. Maybe No wants to portray them as all the same in that way. But then if that was the case, why did he do these introductions in the beginning? I don't really understand what the point of that was. None of these characters, like I said, really stuck out to me. Even Sofia Boutella, an actress I normally really do like, I didn't even think she was that great here. So again, it's really just the ideas that do intrigue me here. Also, I think the dance sequences go on far too long. The film seems like it is obsessed with these dancers, and before they go on LSD, it's honestly pretty boring. There's one sequence especially that just kept going and going, and this song plays that I fucking hated, and I couldn't stand it, and it just wouldn't stop. So, again, there are things I do appreciate about Climax. I appreciate what it's trying to say about LSD. I appreciate the fact that the movie itself tries to make you feel like you're on LSD. I don't think the actresses in the film are bad or anything. I think all the actors are doing a good job for the most part. But just overall, it's a film that just didn't really click with me. Gasper Know is yet to make a film that I actually really do like. And my biggest problem with him is the same as all of his other films, is that I feel like his artistic decisions get in the way of what could be a really great movie and what could have actually been something really effective. Because there are some moments here that are effective, but because of certain choices he made and because of the way he tells the story, I just don't think overall this film really worked for me in the way it did for others. I know a lot of people really do love this film. I know a lot of people think it's one of the best of the year and things like that, but just for me, it didn't really do much. I don't hate it in the way I hate some of Gasper's other films for sure, but it's definitely nothing that really resonated with me at all. A C- for Climax. Again, some things I like, but still don't really like this director very much at all. To be honest, Polaroid, I didn't even know if I could even talk about in this catch-up review, because at the time I had seen it, I didn't even know if it was really a 2019 film. Thankfully, it finally got an official release in, like, September, but I figured, you know what, I had just seen Child's Play, so I told my friends, you know what, guys, let's just watch his other film, see what kind of director he is, because I really liked his directing in Child's Play. And if you had told me that that was the same director who did this, I would not have believed you, because this film is so lazy and it feels so generic in that way, and it's pretty easy to see why it took so long to come out, you know, aside from the whole thing with the, you know, Weinstein Company going under and things like that. Aside from that, that notwithstanding, it's still obvious to see that I think this would have still been a film that did get heavily delayed, because there just isn't a lot to really latch onto here. I mean, right off the bat, the whole premise of this movie, it sounds a lot more interesting than it really is. That what, there's this camera that kills you and things like that. The problem is, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. The rules themselves, they don't really establish them all that well, and it just isn't very well handled in that way. The characters, I mean, forget about it. Our main character, literally her whole thing is that, one, she's like grieving over her dad, but that's like never really touched upon. Two, she wears a scarf, and I'm not talking about like a hijab or something like that, like a headscarf. No, she wears a scarf, and people like berate her for it. And her name is Bird, and she's not made fun of because her name is Bird. She's made fun of for the fact that she wears a scarf, and it's very strange. There's not really much else to latch onto her besides that, and I normally really do like this actress, and she's doing an alright job, but I just didn't really think she stuck out here all that much. The scares are terrible, and also, this movie is maybe some of the worst cinematography of last year. The entire film is pretty much shot in this awful looking grayscale, and I could not believe how terrible it really looked. I could not believe how boring the film was to look at. So it's one of those films where there are a lot of flaws, but the one thing that sticks out the most is just how unpleasant it is to look at. There's not a single shot in this movie that I think even looks somewhat good, because the whole thing is shot in this terrible grayscale, and I don't know why they decided to go in this direction, but it really just sinks the entire film. The actual twist of why what is happening is really stupid. This is just easily one of the worst horror films of last year. D- for Polaroid. It's what you expect, pretty much. Now, switching gears entirely, we go to a film I actually do really love, and that is High Life. This is a film that I really do want to talk a little bit more in depth about, but without getting into a lot, this is a film that I admire a lot of things about. It is a film that it does take place in space, but it's not really about that. This is really a film about how much suffering prisoners really do go through, and kind of takes it to the extreme in a way, and I think they did a really interesting job with that. The direction it goes especially is not at all where I was expecting them to take it, and I thought they did a really good job. The Robert Pattinson, of course, is fantastic here. He does a very good job as this guy who we don't know a lot about, but we know enough about him to the point where we care. We know enough about him to the point where we can understand what he's going through and things like that, and the whole story of him having to take care of this baby, and what we eventually, realize how this baby came to be and things like that. It's a really fucked up story, without getting into it too much. It's way more fucked up than I was expecting, but again, it's like a good fucked up. Like, it's done in a way where I actually think it enhances the story, and I thought they did a good job with that. Without question, though, the big stand on this movie is Juliette Binoche. She is fantastic here, and I've seen her in other things that I've really liked her in, but she is fantastic in this film. Where she ends up going is not at all, like I said, what I was expecting. Her character is all kinds of insane, and I thought she was just great in this movie. I really love what they ended up doing with her, and the nonlinear structure, I think, actually really does benefit this film, because there's a lot of things that, while you're compelled by, you don't really know what's going on, and then they answer it later on in the movie, and I think it actually really does help the film. I love the score here. The cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. I love what they end up doing with it. So really, my only flaws with this film are, I think there is one character, and that's Andre 3000's character. He doesn't really feel like he is as fleshed out as he could have been, especially the direction he ends up going towards the end. while I get why the character went there, it just felt a little bit underdeveloped to me. I think they could have handled that a little bit better overall. And there are some other characters that do feel just a little bit underused, but for the most part, this is definitely one of the better films that I'm talking about here. I really do admire quite a lot about it, and I think it's one that not enough people are talking about. It's definitely not for everyone. Most of the people I watched this with did not like this at all, and I can totally understand that because it is really different and out there, but it's one that I've definitely really dug quite a bit. So B+ for High Life. Definitely one of the better films I'm talking about in this video. Anna, similar to other films I've discussed in this catch-up review, it feels like a movie that would have gone, like, straight to Redbox. Like, this does not feel like a theatrical movie very much at all, and it shows. This film, again, there's some things that are actually kind of good here. The lead is very 50-50 for me. I think when she's in action sequences, she kicks a lot of ass. She definitely does a good job with that, but when it comes to her acting overall, she needs a lot of work. You can definitely tell this is an inexperienced actress that they kind of just plucked because she looked good kicking ass, and that's kind of it, but they didn't take into account if she actually had that acting ability, which I didn't really feel like she had here. Again, there were moments where I thought she was alright, but it was very on and off for me overall. My biggest issue with this movie, though, is that it's yet again just another one of those, like, femme fatale sort of action films, and just doesn't do much to really stick out in that way. It's very generic feeling. I mean, Cillian Murphy, he does a good job for what he has, as well as Helen Mirren. Those two actors are definitely really good here, and they do a good job overall. Again, there are some things that I definitely really did like about the one action sequence you saw in that trailer. It is very thrilling. It actually is really well done. It's probably the highlight of the movie. In fact, most of the action sequences I actually didn't mind here. My problem is this film is so overly complicated. This should be such a simple premise. We're watching this girl, you know, become this assassin, and we're seeing her have to make these difficult choices and what end up getting her here. And there are some things that I just don't understand why the film decided to do. One, the entire film is told in a non-linear structure, and it makes things very confusing. Like, I'm not usually confused with films that are non-linear, but this film, I was generally confused at points. Like, where are we at this point? When is this taking place? Like, it was very hard to tell when certain events were going on, especially in the beginning of the film. It's very hard to tell, okay, when is she training to become a spy, and when is she already, like, a spy? It's very hard to tell overall. They don't do a very good job of that. And at the end of the movie, they throw like 3 or 4 other twists at you that just really make no sense at all. It's one of those films where even when you think you have it figured out, they throw another one on you. There was a point where I legitimately thought they were done, and then there was another one. I was so baffled by the way it was done here, and look, I hate bringing up again, but the director of this movie, I just don't really end up liking all that much. At this point, he's made 2 films that I like, Luc Besson. I adore Leon the Professional, and I liked Valerian, but other than that, I just don't think this guy is all that great, and I have to say, other people brought up, I think his career is kind of over after this film. I know this underperformed, like, really badly. Nobody really went to see this. In fact, the theater I went to see this at, there were like 2 or 3 other people from what I remember. So yeah, I don't think he has much of a career after this movie. And again, I hate saying that because I do think the guy is legitimately talented, and I do think he's made some good films overall. But I think that he's a very style over substance director, and this film very much does show that. There are things here that are modeled after, you know, some really good spy films, but it just feels like it is trying to be like other much better spy films out there, and I just don't think it handles it very well at all. It's easily one of the most generic of last year. Again, there are some things I do really enjoy about it, but overall, like I said, it's a film that's just so needlessly complicated, and a film that has a lead performer that was just very iffy for me, that overall, I just really kind of hated this one. So D+ for Anna. You didn't see it, you know, a lot of people didn't see it, and a good reason why, because it's nothing really all that great. Another one you probably didn't see, Saving Zoey. This is a movie that I really just watched because it seemed like a film that my friend was dreading. So I'm like, okay, we gotta watch this. So we watched it on Rabbit. It's not that bad. It's really not that bad. There are some things that are really bad here. The actual story is pretty dumb. I don't hate the idea of this girl kind of, living in her sister's shadow and things like that, and now she has to mourn her death. I think that could have been an effective film. The problem is they try to turn it into a mystery, and that's really what brings this film down. We have this stupid mystery going on that goes in a direction that really didn't seem like it was headed at all. It very much seems like they just went in this direction because they didn't know how else to end the movie, and it kind of does feel like that, unfortunately, which sucks because I do think there were some interesting things here. The thing that does save this movie are the two sisters, both Laura Marano and Vanessa Marano. These are good actresses, and Laura Marano is really good in this movie. Maybe the best I've ever seen her. I thought she was very good here, and she definitely kept this film grounded. You care enough about what she's going through. Her emotions do feel genuine. You really do feel that she's, lost her sister and things like that. The problem is the movie she's in is just not very interesting, and they don't do, I think, a very good job with really making you care about what's going on. Like I said, the actual reveal of what happened to Zoey, it just doesn't feel like it's the direction where the movie is going, and it's also very, very unsubtle. There's a lot of moments where it's so obvious what the film is trying to do, but it kind of forces it down your throat, especially when she'll literally see her sister's ghost and things like that. And also, it's yet another film that almost the entire thing is in grayscale unless it's flashbacks. It takes the 13 Reasons Why Season 3 approach, and it didn't annoy me as much as it did there. But I just found it to be very unnecessary. It felt like it was talking down to the audience. We were too stupid to tell, what was a flashback and what wasn't, when I feel like it was pretty obvious which was which. But either way, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's still not very good at all. So I C- for Saving Zoey. If it wasn't for the two actresses, this would be a pretty terrible film overall. There's a lot I really do enjoy about The Art of Self-Defense. I think Jesse Eisenberg is really great here. This is definitely one of his best roles, I think, in a long time, where he ends up having to go from this guy that's pretty much defenseless to someone who learns to fight and learns to use that to his advantage. And I thought they did, he overall was really great. But it's Alessandro Nivola. This guy blew me away. I thought he was the absolute standout of this movie, playing sort of a J.K. Simmons in Whiplash kind of role where he's so tough and things like that. However, unlike J.K. Simmons in Whiplash, this is not a good guy. This guy has a very clearly sinister agenda, and you really do start to see that as the film goes on. There's a lot of weird stuff that he'll do as well, and the comedy is actually really good in this movie. There were a lot of moments that were making me laugh. There's a lot of great dark comedy here, and that's something I really did appreciate overall, and I think they did a good job with that. And I think the actual message of this movie about this guy that learns to use violence to his advantage, and how there are both positive and negative consequences of that, I think is a really good one, and there's a really good message in there for sure. My problem with this movie is that I just think it's a little bit too underwritten. I think that there are some things that really could have been dived into a little more, particularly in the third act. While it is fantastic, and I really do love a lot what's going on there, substance-wise, I think execution-wise, I think if they added another 20 to 30 minutes, I would have liked the film even more. I think there's a lot more they could have done there. And for me personally, Imogen Poots' character, while I enjoyed her, I thought she was very underwritten. I thought there was a lot more we could have gotten into with her. There's a lot of things that the film hints at that I actually would have liked to see more of, and I think would have made the film even stronger in that regard. So, again, there's a lot that I really do like here. It's a decent film for sure. There's a lot of fun moments. The performances are really good. But overall, I do think it's a film that has a few things that could have made it even better. But it's definitely a good film. It's one that I don't think everyone's going to like. But it is one that I definitely did win me over in the end. So, B- for Art of Self-Defense. It's not one you need to, rush out and watch or anything. But it is one that I overall enjoyed more than I was expecting to. Cher is a very frustrating film because there's a lot of things that I really enjoyed here. And again, this is probably a film you didn't really see, but it was on HBO. And again, there are things I do overall like about this film. There are things that I do think work here for the most part. I think the main lead here is really good. I really did appreciate. I think she did a really great job here. Rianne Barretto, I was very impressed by her here. Charlie Plummer also gives another very strong performance here. All the acting in here is very strong. I think the actual premise of this movie, of this girl, who was clearly like raped or something like that, and there's like this disturbing video that she doesn't remember and she has to try to figure out what's going on there. I think that's a really good premise. My problem with the movie is that it's very surface level, and I don't think that these things were really dived into as much as they should have been. It comes apparent, I want to say like halfway through the movie, that the film just doesn't have really much of anything different to say. It's basically goes through everything you expect it to, and I just wasn't really all that interested. Like, it's a film that had me for a while, but after a while it really started to lose me because it just wasn't doing anything that interesting. It wasn't doing anything of its own, and that really made it not stick out as much to me. And I think there's a lot more that this film could have dived into for sure. Where it ends up going, while it is definitely, I think, the right place for it to go, it does definitely feel very predictable, and it just overall, it lacked the emotional investment that I think it really needed. Again, there's a lot of things I do appreciate about it. I like the acting here. I like the two performances for the most part, but overall, I just think there's a lot more this film could have done that it ultimately just didn't, and that's what brings this down for me. That's what makes this a film that did overall disappoint me. I think there's a lot more they could have dived into here, and there are things I do think it does a good job with, like seeing how this affects her parents. It's well done. That's something I did appreciate, but as a film, it's one that I have pretty much forgotten overall, so I'd say a C+ for Cher. Again, it's not a bad movie or anything. It's just one that's very underrated, and I think they could have done a much better job with. Sticking with films that are underwritten, we have Skin, a movie that I really want to like. I like what this film is trying to do, that it's taking someone that normally would be a villain in a movie, this guy who is a neo-Nazi. He's been conditioned to feel all these certain ways, but you can see that he is shifting. His whole focus is shifting, and there's a lot of things I love about it. The best easily being Jamie Bell. This is maybe the best I've ever seen him. I thought that he did an incredible job in this movie, really showing the transformation in a very visceral way. You can really see what this character's been through. You can see that he's someone that, you know, he doesn't necessarily agree with these things. He just hasn't really had any other option. He's just always kind of thought like, you know, this is how he's been conditioned to feel. And the film doesn't try to absolve him of this either. Like, they make it clear, like, this character knows what he's done is wrong. This character knows that he is not necessarily a good person. And I did like the characterization there, and I thought they did a good job with that. Unfortunately, where the film loses me is his actual transformation, and it's obviously the biggest part. Unfortunately, my biggest problem with this movie is a pretty severe one, and that is his actual transformation. Because, look, you can understand why he's feeling this way. I mean, I think any rational human being is going to feel this way, especially when you see characters like Danielle McDonald and how vehemently opposed she is to all this and how she's trying to get away from all of this. I mean, the way that these neo-Nazis, like, go about life, it's disgusting. The way they go about things, the way they treat each other and things, and the way they always think they're right. There's something deeply fascinating about it all, and the film does dive into that pretty heavily. But there isn't that one moment where you get why he's feeling this way. He spends the first half of the movie relatively okay with this. It doesn't really feel like he is shifting in that way. It only feels like once he meets Danielle McDonald, that's when he really starts to shift focus. And I just needed that one moment where he has that realization where it's like, holy shit, what am I doing? Why have I been, involved in this kind of thing? And I think it just would have elevated the overall story, because while his transformation does, for the most part, work, there isn't that one moment where you can tell why he is feeling the way, other than, we as human beings obviously feel what he's doing is wrong, and we know what he's doing is morally wrong. So again, I think the performances here are very strong. There are moments here that definitely do work, but overall, because it really misses the mark there, I can't overall say this film worked for me. There are too many things that just really do bring this one down, unfortunately. So I'd have to give this one a C+ as well. Again, great acting. There's some good ideas in there, but just overall, it didn't really do much for me. On the surface, A Score to Settle seems like it's going to be a very entertaining film. I mean, you have Nick Cage as like a former mob boss. How can that not be amazing? Well, it's because it's really fucking boring. That's why. Most of this film kind of feels like Nicolas Cage's version of Gotti, but like not nearly as incompetently made, so it's more boring in that way. There isn't a lot to really like about this one. There's at least like 2 or 3 good Nicolas Cage moments. Like, there's a moment where he's playing the piano and he starts singing Always Chasing Rainbows, and that scene was all kinds of glorious. I love the way that was done. There's a really good freak out like towards the end and things like that, but throughout most of the movie, he's doing this very subdued performance. But the problem is, this is not a movie that I'm that invested in, so I just didn't really care. Most of these characters come off as very just cartoony to me, and Cage is, like I said, far more subdued, and you just don't really care about much of what's going on. It's just really boring in that way. There's not really a ton to say about it, other than it was a film that I thought could have been fun, but really just bored the living shit out of me, and I don't think was very well handled at all. And the ending of the movie is so rushed to the point where I didn't even notice the movie was ending. I didn't even notice we were at that point. Like, the movie does not do a good job with showing where we are, like, time-wise. They don't do a good job with that at all. So yeah, I'd have to give this one a D. It was really bad. Cage holds his own for the most part, but this is definitely one of the more boring films he's done, for sure. Okay, another hot take coming. Yeah, I was not a fan of this one. Look, there are things I want to like about The Souvenir. This is a film I desperately want to like. Honor Swinburne is fantastic here. That is something I will definitely agree with everyone on. I think she's fantastic in this movie. Her performance is very strong. You can understand what she's going through, that she, wants to be in LA and things like that. And what the film has to say about, like, relationships and, people who are filmmakers, I think is very interesting. However, my biggest problem with this movie is that I just don't think it dives into this main relationship as well as it should have. It's glacially slow, and it's really one of those films that almost all the dialogue is very stilted, it's very quiet. And I get it, it's trying to portray this toxic relationship, but the problem is, when we're introduced to these two, you don't really get the sense that these two would ever like each other. This guy starts off, and he's just kind of an asshole, and you're kind of wondering, like, why exactly would she have even want to be with someone like this guy? Like, you don't really get, like, what he really likes about her, because he seems pretty much just like an asshole throughout most of the movie, and I don't think they did a very good job diving into that. So when things really start to go more south for them, it's not particularly interesting, because it doesn't really feel all that different from what we saw in the beginning of the film when their relationship was seemingly in a good place. And I just don't think they handled that very well at all. And like I said, the film, I think, is also way too slow. There are so many scenes that just dragged on and on that I just did not care about. Tilda Swinton's character I also found particularly boring. And I usually really love Tilda Swinton, but I don't think she really worked in this movie that much. And I didn't really feel like she had much to do here, very much at all. And I kept hoping, this is one of those films where I kept hoping this is going to go somewhere great. I'm finally going to get what people are saying, but it just never happened for me. It never got to that point where I'm like, okay, now I get it. Now I get why people are, talking about this movie so much. Now I get why people are really loving this one. Look, I love the fact that this film is getting a lot of acclaim. I love the fact that people are going to see this film because you should support smaller movies and things like that, but I just can't hold the same sentiment. It's not one that did much of anything for me. I didn't find it to be really all that interesting. I really did love the main performance here. I definitely get why people are praising her, but everything else I just found to be really just whatever. It's a movie that really did not leave much of an impact on me, and I hate saying that because I usually adore A24, but for me, this is probably the most overrated film of the year. I just really didn't get the hype here, and yeah, I mean, there are things that I definitely liked about it, but overall, I just found myself not really caring about much of what was going on, and the way the movie ended especially, I thought was very unsatisfying. The way they wrap things up, I get the way it was supposed to end, and I get that it's supposed to feel unsatisfying in that way, but because the rest of the film, I felt that same unsatisfaction, it just kind of added to how little I cared about what was going on. So again, I appreciate what the film has to say about toxic relations and things like that, but if you want a better examination, go watch Midsummer, because this one did not do that much for me. I'd give this one like a C. I didn't hate it or anything, but definitely let me down considering the constant praise it's been getting. So, Banana Splits movie. This is a film that, I saw the trailer for. I thought, hey, this looks like a lot of fun, right? It's a children's show from like the 60s that people always said had like a very like horror sort of undertone to it. They're turned into a horror movie. They're trying to, they're animatronics and have like malfunctioning and try to kill all the guests and things like that. They got these like, they got voice actors. It seems like a lot of fun, right? Well, no, actually. This film is surprisingly dreadfully boring. I mean, you would expect for a movie like the Banana Splits movie to be really stupid and to be very self-aware and to be a lot of fun, but no, this film takes itself way too seriously, and it just does not work at all. And look, right off the bat, there are some fun kills here. At first, I thought some of the kills were fun, but the more it went on, the more lame they really did become, and I started to realize just how boring of a film it really was and how it really felt oddly kind of sanitized. Like, it didn't really feel like they were really utilizing that R rating in the way that they should, and that really brought it down for me. I did think that the main actress was actually really good here. You can see how she really wants to help her son, but you can also see what she's going through in her marriage and things like that, and I thought overall she did a really good job. But my biggest problem with this movie is its storytelling overall. Aside from that story, we get like 4 or 5 other sort of side stories here, and none of them are particularly interesting. All of them just feel like they're inserted in here so you can care a little more when that person ends up dying, and it didn't work overall. I didn't care about any of these stories. I found them all to be really just not interesting, and it just didn't really do all that much for me. And it sucks because a movie like the Banana Splits movie should be so much fun. Like, why are you taking this so seriously? These are animatronics that are, fucked up, and they're killing guests, and they're doing all this wacky shit, but they're not doing anything fun in this movie. There are moments that, yes, are fun at first, but again, as it goes on, it just gets so boring, and I don't know how to really describe it, but it should be fun, and it's not, and I don't really get it. So, yeah, I kind of hated this one. Like, this is a film that I went into thinking this could be a really great guilty pleasure, but coming out of it, I was just so disappointed by how bored I really was. So, a D for Banana Splits movie. Really terrible acting, really lame kills, and just overall a film that, for a movie that is supposed to be just a ridiculous, like, horror film, it just takes itself far too seriously, and it just brought the whole thing down for me. Definitely one of my most disappointing films of last year for sure, even though I was like unironically looking forward to it. I didn't even get like a good time here. Like, it was very disappointing. Alright, real talk, Sun is also a star I barely even remember. I just remember it's terrible. That's all I remember. The 2 leads have, like, zero chemistry whatsoever. Charles Melton especially, just talking every single line he says like this, and he just sounds really bored in the movie, and he doesn't sound like he's particularly invested at all. Like, fucking emote, man. Like, seriously. There's no chemistry between these two. A lot of the movie, you're just kind of watching them go through this story that just isn't very interesting. And then let me address the elephant. The immigration stuff. The thing that really was, you know, it really seemed like it was going to be a very big part of this movie. It doesn't even really become a thing until, like, the third act. Before that, we get into the idea that, like, you know, her parents are, like, illegal immigrants and things like that, but the whole thing with them being deported, that's not really set up until, like, the last half of this movie, and it feels very rushed. The way it happens is really dumb. The ending, especially, is pretty terrible. I just don't really remember it, though. I just remember really hating this film and thinking that it's super cheesy, thinking that the leads had no chemistry whatsoever, that it wasn't believable at all, and it just wasn't doing much of anything for me. So, yeah, really hated this one, but I guess I don't really remember it at all, but it's whatever. I mean, it's a bad movie, but I don't really have much to say. So I guess a D for Sun. I was at a D, but I guess a D plus for Sun is also a star because I don't really remember it at all, but whatever. Where'd you go, Bernadette? Holy shit, how the mighty have fallen. Look, in the past few years, I feel like Richard Linklater has kind of been a director in decline. This is the kind of film that really shows he needs to take some kind of a break, because this movie did not work for me very much at all. And look, there are some things here that do work. Cate Blanchett is obviously good here. She's great in pretty much anything, and that's definitely the case here. She does a very good job at bringing this character to life, I think grounding her a little bit, and I think overall that does work for the most part. The problem is Bernadette is a very unlikable character, and look, the film tries to justify it by talking about how she has this, like, mental disorder that makes her this way, and there's a point where you think maybe she's going to do something to help herself out, maybe she's going to do something to, you know, take care of herself, and I was actually really down for that. I was like, holy shit, okay, this is going to be a really good depiction of mental illness and things like that. And then it just turns into a rescue movie, essentially. Like, the whole Where'd You Go, Bernadette, that's not even, like, a big part of the movie. You literally find out, like, 5 minutes after she's disappeared where she's gone off to. There is zero suspense there, and they do not do a good job with that at all. Most of the movie is just Bernadette kind of just being an asshole to everyone, and then the film trying to justify it. But then what really pisses me off about this film, besides the fact that almost everyone else here I really couldn't stand all. Billy Crudup I thought was hilariously terrible. A lot of people are like, oh, he's so good in this movie. I thought he was really overacting to the point where it felt like he was in, like, a Lifetime movie, and there were a few moments where I legitimately started chuckling because I thought he was really hamming it up here. The young girl here I actually didn't think was too bad, but her character I really couldn't stand at all, especially what the message of the movie is. Without spoiling anything, the movie essentially is trying to tell you that her wanting to get help for her mental illness is a problem, and that she needs to not do that. She needs to not worry about that stuff. She needs to not focus on herself, and I just found it to be really kind of disgusting. The ending really disgusted me, the way it was done. It felt so disingenuous. I didn't understand what they were really trying to do there, and I just really found myself hating this one more than I was expecting. I was expecting to find this just kind of okay because the trailers really didn't do all that much for me. I came out pretty much hating it because honestly, I just really couldn't stand a lot of this, but that last message really just pretty much just stuck the nail in the coffin for me. That really made me realize just how bad of a movie this really was. Look, I really love Richard Linklater a lot, but he really does need to take a break. I'm very excited to see how that Merrily We Roll On film turns out, because I think he really needs something like that right now. This was just a really bad film that didn't even really feel like something he'd direct. Definitely his worst film for me. D+ for Where'd You Go, Bernadette. I hated this way more than I expected to. So there's been more than a few films that I've talked about in this that have been really disappointing, but not many of them are as disappointing as The Kitchen, because holy shit, just talk about a film that just completely doesn't understand its potential and completely forgets everything that could have made it great. I mean, this is a film that I thought really could have been a great vehicle for, like, Melissa McCarthy and Tiffany Haddish and things like that, but instead, it's a film that just feels so severely underwritten. All of these characters just just aren't very interesting at all. The only one I was somewhat invested in was Elizabeth Moss, and even at that, her storyline was so underwritten for me. I don't think they did a good job with really fleshing anyone out here. Melissa McCarthy, there's really not much to her. And then Tiffany Haddish, there's not much to her. And then, similar to other films I've talked about, it's also very needlessly complicated. There's so many twists in the third act that are really just there just to keep you from falling asleep because they know the audience is bored and they're trying to keep you as invested as possible. And it just really didn't work at all. The music choices in this film, again, while it is 70s music, almost feels like they're there just to montage through what could have been far more interesting events, because virtually everything in this movie that you want them to dive into is not dived into in that way. There are so many things that they could have focused on more that they just simply don't, and it just brings the entire film down. There's so many things that just really were underwritten here to me, and really just, like I said, ruined almost the entire film. I just did not like this one at all. I thought it was really badly written. The dialogue was terrible. There's so much exposition, and it feels like one of those movies where it's tons of exposition with almost no payoff whatsoever. The way the movie ended, I was baffled by. This is easily one of the most disappointing movies of last year. Big fat D for The Kitchen. Definitely very disappointing film for sure. Alright, real quick, Zombie Tidal Wave. Again, a film that I thought could have been a great guilty pleasure, and it's really boring. There's not a lot to really like about this one. The CGI is terrible, but not in a Sharknado way where it's funny, and that's what's so weird about it, because Ian Ziering and Anthony C. Ferrante are teaming up again, and it just feels like one of those things where lightning just did not strike twice. One franchise, it can work, but it's not going to work again, and it very much does show here, because overall, this just didn't really work out at all. I didn't think it was very entertaining. I thought most of the kills were really lame. The acting here was really bad. Ian Ziering, he's always trying, and he definitely does try with this film, but overall, very, very disappointing stuff. I thought this could have been a lot more fun than it was, and it really did not understand its true potential. So a D for this one as well. Very, very disappointing. Well, considering how long this video is, somehow I ended up cutting out one of the movies by mistake. So, oops, but very quick, look, I know a lot of people thought this one wasn't as bad as it was going to be. I fucking despise this one. I thought that this was so bad. The whole concept in itself is ridiculous, but the biggest problem with this movie is easily, one, the miscasting of the little girl here. She's just not convincing at all as a older Regina Hall. The things that she's saying, it just comes across as really cringy, and it's so obvious too. Like, I don't understand why everyone else wouldn't be at least a little bit suspicious with the things that she's saying. I just found that very strange overall. And then Regina Hall in this movie, I mean, she had a really good year in 2018, and I don't know what happened here, but she is terrible. She's so cartoony and over the top. She's one of those bosses that's like really mean that you see in comedies, but it's taken to a heightened level where it just is so overly done. This is a boss who legitimately doesn't let them eat, doesn't let them listen to music. She's just so mean, and then when she eventually, like, transforms, it doesn't feel like she's learned anything at all. The only redeeming thing about this movie really is Issa Rae. I thought she did a good job of what she had. She actually did get some laughs out of me. But other than that, I found this film to be just ridiculously unfunny, really cringy, and very, very hard to watch at points. So, yeah, definitely D- for Little for sure. And, hey, it's a different day. You're about to see a different camera quality and things like that, so just get ready so it doesn't make it too jarring. But yeah, had to talk. I talked about this one originally, figured I'd talk about it again, and yeah, so next movie. Holy shit, The Professor. I mean, look, Johnny Depp is an actor that's been in decline for a very long time. The Professor just shows how he really needs another Black Mass, like, ASAP. Like, remember when Black Mass came out, everyone thought that was going to be the film that redeems Depp, and then nobody went to go see it, and so it didn't end up doing as well as people thought? Well, now because of that, he's back playing these roles that just don't fit him at all, and this is easily one of his worst roles to date. I mean, he's playing this professor that is just so boring and borderline creepy. I mean, this guy literally, it's implied, has sexual relations with two of his students. One of them's a guy, and it's this really weird scene where they kind of hint to the fact he might be gay. It's never brought up again. It's really weird that they hinted this once. And then the other one, even creepier, is the one with Zoey Deutsch. He has this really weird relationship with her, and it just comes across as creepy. And I think the biggest error, the biggest reason for that is because the students don't at all seemed uncomfortable with this. Like, they're fine with just having their professor go out to a bar with them. Like, it's really problematic in that way. Like, you don't even stop to think for a second, like, maybe this is just a little bit wrong. Maybe this is a really bad idea. I mean, it's just, it was a very, very hard watch for sure. And Johnny Depp just sounds pretty miserable throughout this entire thing. It really does not seem like he's into this very much at all. There's not a single time we were even remotely convinced that that he's really into this role very much. And I mean, the entire premise of like this guy having this like life-changing diagnosis, it should be really heartbreaking, right? But it's not, because it just comes off as kind of an afterthought. It's really only there to propel the plot forward, and they don't really do a good job with it. Danny Houston, his character had some potential, but he just ends up coming off really cliche. There's also a really bad storyline involving his daughter, played by Odessa Yun, who I really liked in Assassination Nation, and I've been waiting to see her do something good. This is not it. This is not it at all. Basically she wants to come out to like her parents, and you can tell they're not that like accepting of it, and there's so many problematic things in this movie, and it's easily one of the most, I'd say, problematic of the entire year for sure. Look, I like Johnny Depp as an actor, and I'm waiting for that comeback, but this ain't it, Chief, for sure. D- for the professor for sure. Definitely a very, very uncomfortable experience that I really hope none of you have the misfortune of watching. I mean, what can I say about After that I haven't said about literally every other film that's like it? It's exactly what you're expecting. It's cheesy, it's so cringy, it's so over the top and stupid. It's a film that just doesn't make any sense. It's just awful in pretty much every regard. There's not a single thing to like about this movie. The guy that she likes in the film, it's such a weird relation, because at first it seems like she wants nothing to do with him. Like, she's so put off by the way that he's acting. Like, he's being all stalkerish. He's trying to like get with her, and she's just like not into it. Like, you can tell she is not into this idea at all. And then suddenly she is. Suddenly she's just fine with the idea of them being together, but the whole time she forgets that she's also supposed to have a boyfriend. She has another boyfriend that she rarely brings up. When he comes on screen, he's basically just used as a plot device in that way, and it's just so horribly written. The main girl here, she's actually Catherine Langford's sister, and I'll just say right now, the talent does not rub off in the family. She is really bad here, and it very much seems like this is just kind of like a nepotism situation where they're like, oh, Catherine's bankable, let's see if Josephine is bankable. She's not bankable at all. She's so wooden and just plain, and it just doesn't work at all. It's so hard to tell what's going through her head most of the time, and you wonder why she'd even like this guy. Like I said, the way this guy comes off, it's really creepy. He doesn't come off as someone that generally likes her and is this really sweet guy. No, he comes off as someone who is just very whiny and kind of like an incel almost. It's honestly really, really creepy to watch, and the film does not do a good job with getting into that romance at all. There's so many scenes that were just stupid to me. Her mother, especially, the way she acts in the film, you would think that she's like a young teenager, but this girl's supposed to be in college, and the way her mom goes about it, she acts like she's still in high school. It's like, I'm sorry, but you have no control over who your daughter is going to smash. You just don't have control over that anymore, and I don't understand why she's so, like, upset about it. It's just, there's so many things I hate about this film. I was gonna do a whole rant for this one, but Again, it's another one of those films where I just did not have the time to do it. But like I said, it's about as bad as you expect. Definitely an F for After. There's nothing redeemable about this movie. For sure, one of the worst of last year. But switching gears entirely, we go to a film that I actually loved. I adore The Last Black Man in San Francisco. There's so many things I think this film does so well. Right off the bat, the two main performances here are both fantastic. The main dude, I actually haven't really seen in much of anything, and that's mainly because a lot of this is actually based off of his life. From what I understand, he kind of grew up in this community that, was predominantly black and things like that, and he came back and he just didn't recognize it anymore. And I thought he did such an incredible job. Jonathan Majors as well, though. He, I think, is the big standout performance of this entire movie. He has one monologue especially that almost brought me near tears. I don't think enough people are talking about just how good he is in that film. I thought he did an incredible job there, and both of them anchor the film quite well. But beyond that, I think this is a really great film about basically two people that live in this society that they just do not fit into. The way things have changed, the way certain just little things like the way the neighborhood has changed, or the way the people are acting, or the certain, the certain mannerisms of different people are just not things that they fit into. It's a perfect example of gentrification. I think the film does a really good job with that. But it also is about letting go of your past, because for the main character especially, he has major ties to this house, and he has this hope that he's going to be able to get it back, that he's going to be able to stay in it, that this property is his. But as the film goes on, he kind of starts to have to realize, like, he needs to start to say goodbye to those things. And it's heartbreaking to watch, but I think they did a really great job with getting you to latch onto this story, and I definitely really love the way that was all fleshed out there. The cinematography, though, in this film, though, is definitely on another level. I mean, there's something to be said, especially about the first shot here, the way it's almost shot like a stage play. They did such an excellent job with that. The way certain shots, sometimes they'll do freeze frames. I mean, it's one of the most, I think, creative uses of cinematography in any film last year, and I absolutely love that. One of my favorite scores as well. Oh my god, Emil Masari's score is so good to this movie. It's really just bittersweet, and it gives the whole film this very sort of melancholy feel, and I love the way it was done there. Really my only complaints when it comes to this movie, because there really is a lot I love, is that the first, I would say, 40 minutes is a little bit too slow for my liking. It takes a little while for this film to really get going and for it to really start to have a story. A lot of it is just, we have things that are happening, but there isn't a huge story. But eventually, once we get to a certain scene, that's really when the film starts to get great, and that's really when it starts to come together more. And from there, I was pretty much locked in. This is definitely, I think, one of the most overlooked films of last year for sure. I really adored this one quite a bit. Definite A- for Last Black Man in San Francisco. This was a fantastic film for sure that I wish was getting a lot more attention, because it definitely is pretty great. Don't Let Go, I honestly don't remember very much at all. This is the definition of just such a whatever film. And it makes sense because it came out like the last week of August and nobody saw it. I remember it made like almost no money at the box. Like it was in, I believe, like 10th place or something like that, like the first week it came out. And it's very obvious to see why. This is such a unremarkable film. I mean, David Oyelowo is pretty good here, and Storm Reid does the best with what she can, but the biggest problem with this movie is that they just don't take enough time to really delve into anything. You don't care about their relation because they have one conversation, then all of a sudden the whole murder happens, or, you'll have David Oyelowo immediately thrown in this situation. The film just doesn't want to take its time on anything, and that really is to the film's detriment in that way, because once it gets into it, you just don't really care about what's going on. It takes you out of it relatively quickly, and the way they handle this whole sort of scenario, it sounds a lot more interesting than it is, and it really just isn't that interesting, and where they end up taking it really just doesn't make any sense. They don't do a good job with laying the foundation of like how this all works, how he's able to go into this alternate world, what's really going on here. They don't do a good job with explaining it at all. And also the way that they reveal who the villain is, it's really corny, it's really stupid. There's a lot of moments in this film that are just really dumb overall. And again, David Oyelowo is doing a good job. He's a really competent actor, and it does show here, but for the most part, this is just such a disposable film that I've honestly pretty much forgotten. C for Don't Let Go. I really don't have too much to say about this one at all. It's just, you didn't see it, and for good reason, because it's nothing worth really checking out. Next movie. Oh my god, the Phanatic. Look, this is one that I wanted to do a full review for because in this catch-up review, there's been some movies I've talked about where I've said I wanted this to be a guilty pleasure and it disappointed me. The Phanatic was everything that I was hoping for it to be. This is a terrible film. Absolutely terrible film, but oh my god, did I have a blast with it. This is easily one of the dumbest films that I think I've ever seen, but that's really what elevates it. I mean, just the character that John Travolta's playing alone, this character of Moose, he's so laughable in the way that he goes about things, and I get it that he's supposed to be, like, on the spectrum, but the way that Travolta plays him is so incomprehensible, and it's to the point where he almost feels like a cartoon character, and you can tell that this, and the fact that it's also a 40-year-old man doing all of this, that's really what makes it hilarious. I mean, just the line delivery that he has is just priceless. The movie literally starts off with the line, "Can't talk, I gotta poo," and so, like, from there, you pretty much know what you're getting into, and then Devon Sawa just really seemed like he did not want to be there very much at all. They clearly just got him because they needed someone that wasn't that well known, but was a thing at some point, so they plucked him into this movie, and there is one scene with him, because if you know him from Limp Bizkit. There is literally a scene in this movie where you see Devon Sawa, he puts on, the radio, and, he's talking to, like, his son and things like that, and they start talking about Limp Bizkit and how great Limp Bizkit is. And the director of this movie, as I said, is the Limp Bizkit, of course. So yeah, that happens, and it's amazing. It's amazing what ends up happening there. This is really just a film you have to see to believe. There's so many just crazy things that go on in this movie, whether it's him attacking Devon Sawa with, like, this Jason Voorhees mask, or him, like, using, like, this prop knife. So many ridiculous shit that happens in this movie, or him getting mad at his friend for, like, blocking him on his phone, but then, like, he doesn't, like, want a phone or something like that. There's so many just stupid things in this movie. The movie's also narrated by someone who almost has, like, no reason to be narrating it whatsoever. Like, there's so many things that, like, she doesn't know about, so it's like, how do you know about this? Why are you narrating it? But honestly, I didn't care. There's a really weird recurring thing with, like, all this art as well, but it just makes the movie that much shittier. And look, for a film like this, I just had such a blast with it. Look, objectively, yes, this is one of the worst of the year, but it's definitely not for me because I just had such a fucking blast with it. So I guess I'm neutral. It's a C. That's where I'd put the Phanatic, but it's one of the highest C's I could ever give because it is one of the best guilty pleasures that I have seen in such a long time. It's one of the funniest films that I've seen in a long time, and it's a film where I honestly would recommend watching it because it's just that terrible, and it's just one you have to see to believe. Absolutely a terrible film, but one that I love this shit out of in terms of how terrible it was. Brittany Runs a Marathon was a lot better than I was expecting it to be. I mean, right off the bat, this is easily the best I've ever seen Jillian Bell. She poured her heart and soul into this role, especially with how much weight she lost and things like that. But it's not just one of those things where, like, physically she went through a transformation. It really does seem like she did a lot more than she usually does. There's a lot more range from her in this movie, and she, I think, did a really good job here. It's definitely the best I've ever, certainly the best I've seen her since 22 Jump Street, because that's, like, the only other film film I really do like her in. But right off the bat, I think this film is really well done, because you have a character here that I think could come across very unlikable. And at first, she was for me because, you know, you see her determination to run this race and things like that. And you really do love that because, you know, she's treated like shit by a lot of people in her life who are telling her that she can't do it and they're putting her down. And so, in that sense, it's very inspiring. But there is a point in the movie where it starts to affect almost every relationship in her life. And she starts to become really shitty. And for a while, I was like, oh my God, what are they doing to this character? But the best thing I can say about it, and the thing that really saved it for me, is that the film recognizes that, like, yeah, what she's doing is wrong, and she also recognizes what she's doing is wrong. So I actually really enjoyed that. This is a very good film about, you know, it's about believing in yourself, but it also is about not overworking yourself and having time for those that matter in your life. And I think that's actually a really important message because, yes, we've seen tons of films that are inspiring in the sense of, like, you know, follow your dreams and things like that. But I feel like this film actually kind of went beyond that. It's not just about that. It's also about how sometimes we'll be so focused on our goal that other things in our life suffer. And we need to be able to discipline ourselves and know that sometimes we need to take a break. Sometimes we need to focus on those things that matter in life, you know, and especially her relationship with, say, you know, the main relationship that she's with in this movie was actually really sweet. It was much better handled than I was expecting it to be. Akash Ambadkar I thought was really good in the movie. I really liked what he ended up doing. Loro Howery was not in it as much as I was expecting, but for what he has, he definitely does do a really solid job. Really, everyone I thought was really great in this movie. I don't really think there was like a bad actor in here. I thought everyone did a really solid job for the most part. And like I said, just a much better film than I really was expecting. There are some portions that do drag for me. There's also one relationship that I did not feel was fleshed out very well at all. And the way that it wraps up especially just was not very satisfying to me. And I think they could have handled a little bit better. But for what this is, it's a lot better than I expected to be. Definite B for Brittany Runs a Marathon. Really, really enjoyed this one. Burn is a film that intrigued me at first. I'm not gonna lie. There were some things here that were kind of intriguing. This girl who works at this, like, gas station of sorts, and you can tell that she's a little bit off. A little bit is putting it lightly. I mean, there's always something really weird about her, and, you can see that she is just, but you can also see that almost everyone else isn't really treating her in the way that she, you know, that she should be. They're not giving her that respect and things like that. And you do feel bad for her at first, but there comes a point where this character does something that is pretty much irredeemable. And after that point, it's very hard to still want to root for her. And it almost feels like the film is condoning what she's doing because everyone else was shitty to her. But you kind of realize, nope, she kind of deserved it because the way that she was acting, especially, was not very good. I mean, she was putting, you know, her coworkers at risk. She was putting other people at risk, and especially what she does to, like, say, Josh Hutcherson's character. Yes, we recognize that he's a bad guy. We recognize that he's a criminal and things like that. But what she does, she just goes way too far, and I think that's my biggest problem with this movie is that I get that this character is supposed to be really fucked up. But the problem is the film does not dive deep enough into her for me to really understand why she would do these things. The film seems much more focused on shock value. There's a choice they make, especially in the beginning of the film, in like the 40-minute mark, that I thought was completely unearned. And I was very caught off guard by what they did. And after that moment, the film just completely lost me after that. There's so many choices in this movie that are so baffling. And I think especially it's severely underwritten. We really needed to dive a lot deeper into her for me to really understand any of what she was doing here. Because to me, it just came across as this bitch is crazy and she's doing these things because, well, we need her to for the plot. Like, I really felt like they could have had something good here, but unfortunately, it just didn't really work very much at all. Also, the main girl is just not very good in this role. I did not think she was doing that good of a job, and I do think she is honestly kind of miscasted here. The rest of the cast actually isn't too bad. Josh Hutcherson, Suki Waterhouse. I mean, I like the other actors in this movie, but it's just the main girl is not good here really at all. And considering that the whole film is about her, it really does bring a lot of things down. You would think this would be one of the worst films of the year from the way I'm talking about, but no, because I did see a lot of potential here. I saw a lot of things that they could have done right. And the fact that it disappointed me, I think is a recommendation of. I would certainly not recommend this movie, but it's definitely a little bit better than I was expecting. It's still pretty terrible though, so I'd probably give this one like a D plus. Definitely one of those films where I really felt like I wasted my time watching it, especially with the way it ended, and just overall did pretty much nothing for me. Strange But True is another one where it started off actually really interesting. I thought that it could have come off across as really lifetimey, but the way it started off, I was like, oh, they're actually doing a really good job with diving into this conflict, showing what these characters are going through. That this girl comes out of nowhere saying that, like, she's pregnant, and now they're kind of thrown in this situation, but at the same time, they don't really believe her. And Nick Robinson is the only one that does believe her, and these two kind of form this really sweet bond. And if the whole film would have just been about that, I would have been fine. The problem is this movie feels it needs to be something a lot different, and halfway through, it changes tones entirely. The first half of the movie is pretty much, I'd say, a family drama. It's showing the troubles that this family is going through and how it's affecting them trusting, this girl, who, by the way, is really not in it that much in the first half, very much at all. I mean, I love Margaret Qualley a lot, but she's not in the first half that much. The second half, a revelation happens, and it pretty much turns into a thriller after that. And I will give it props. It did not go where I thought it was going to go. Thankfully, it did not go in the direction I thought it was going to. But it still was not the direction I wanted it to go in. It still was pretty stupid overall, and I just don't think it really fit in this movie, and especially the twist itself, I just don't think really worked, and I thought overall was really dumb, and I did not think was very well handled here. And look, the acting really is not too bad. I mean, Amy Ryan's really good. Nick Robinson is great here. Margaret Qualley's really good. Everyone does a good job in this movie, and there are things I do overall like about it. But at the end of the day, I just felt like this was a film that didn't know what it wanted to be. It felt like it could have been something really different, but unfortunately, halfway through, it just kind of turns into a rejected Lifetime movie. Again, it wasn't as boring as I thought it would be. It wasn't as predictable as I thought it would be, but still, it's so tonally confusing. It's very hard to tell what they were trying to do with this film. I really don't understand why the film went in the direction it did, and it's definitely one of the most confounding films of last year for sure, because again, there's stuff I like here, but overall, I just found it to be a huge mixed bag for the most part. So definitely a C for Strange But True. Again, one you probably didn't see, but again, it's one that I think had a lot more potential than it ended up delivering. Mr. America, I absolutely adored. Look, I'm a huge fan of On Cinema at the Cinema. I love that show dearly. Me and my friend Adam Haskell, we watch that show a lot, and it's one of those shows where, it always just gets us to hysterically laugh. And a lot of people don't find it funny because it's a very specific kind of humor. But you know what? It's right up my alley, and because of that, this film delivered in pretty much every way I needed to. But it was a lot better written than I was expecting as well, because this film is essentially a character study. I mean, as ridiculous as Tim Heidecker is, at least, the character of Tim Heidecker in the show, They do a really good job with getting you to understand him, that he is essentially someone that is in denial. He is very much in over his head, that he feels that he can be, that he can just run for district attorney, even though he has zero chance of doing so. So there always is some, that in itself is very much the punchline, that we're watching a guy that essentially has no chance. He's not even in the, he's not even in the running. Like, nobody is going to vote for this guy, and yet he still keeps up this hope that it's going to work out for him. He goes as far as to get like a campaign manager and things like that he heavily disagrees with. And there's a lot of great stuff going on there. There's a great scene, especially where he has this speech, and you can tell that he's trying to keep up this appearance, but at the same time, he's really fractured him and Greg Turkington's relationship. Greg Turkington is someone that really despises him, and again, that stuff is absolutely hysterical. I love just getting to see a Greg that didn't hold back, because on cinema, there are so many points where you can tell that he's just so pissed at what Tim is doing, that he doesn't let him revel in any of his nostalgia. He's someone that actually loves classic movies, whereas Tim is clearly just doing it for the fame. He's just doing it for the recognition. But Greg is actually really passionate about this stuff, and there's a really great recurring joke, especially with a very obscure Disney sequel. I don't want to spoil it, but every time they went back to it, it got funnier and funnier for me. I love the rivalry between these two. I thought Turkington and Heidecker just really went all out here in crafting something really hysterical. I also have to say, Tim Heidecker is amazing here. He can definitely carry a film, and that's something he very much does show in this movie, because up till now, I've really only seen him in, like, smaller roles, and this really makes me hope that we can get something really fucking great for him one day, because in a role that's slightly less ridiculous, I think he could become a really dynamic actor, and he really does show that he has the talent to lead a film here, and I really hope he does get to do that, because he's pretty phenomenal in this film. And again, I don't think you're going to like this film as much if you haven't seen On Cinema at the Cinema, but if you have seen at least the latest episodes, I think this film is really going to deliver for you, and I had such a amazing time with it. Definitely one of the funniest films of last year, for sure. I really adored this one quite a bit. A- for Mr. America. Not just a hilarious film, a film that I think is actually really well told, a film that is a lot more insightful than I was expecting. It had a lot to say about fame and about denial and things like that, and how people are constantly building themselves up to be better than they are and things like that. I mean, it has a lot of great stuff to say about that, and I just really ended up loving this one. So definitely, like I said, A- for Mr. America. Once again, we have yet another guilty pleasure that I wanted to do a whole review for, but I just did not have the time. But now that I finally get to talk about, Serenity is one of the most obscure and ridiculous films I think I've ever seen. I mean, the second this movie starts off, you just know something's off. Like, the way people are acting, Matthew McConaughey's character is literally so obsessed with, like, fishing. That's all he talks about. He's just, oh, I gotta go fishing. I gotta go fishing. Like, that's all that matters to me. He's gotta hunt the tuna. You gotta talk about the big tuna. Like, that's all he cares about in this movie, and it's absolutely hysterical. I don't know how to really describe it, but oh my god, I loved it. And you got Anne Hathaway acting like this porn actress and things like that, and she's so over the top. Virtually every actor in this movie feels like they're in a different movie. Jeremy Strong, I don't know what he's supposed to be doing here, but oh my god, I got a kick out of it. He has this really weird role where he's just kind of like speaking exposition, but he's doing it in such a way where it's so, like, stilted and weird. I mean, like I said, every single actor feels like they're in a completely different movie, and I've never really seen something like that happen. But oh my god, I'm glad it did here, because it really just elevated the hilarity here for me. I mean, the whole idea of what they end up doing with this film is amazing. The twist, especially, is so dumb, but it's so dumb that I kind of love that they went there, because it just made the film that much more ridiculous. This totally feels like a film to me that they knew was stupid. Like, they knew this film was really dumb, and they tried, so they didn't really take it seriously at all. It very much seems that way. And I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be that way, but it certainly does feel that way. And again, it's similar to Phanatic, where it's really hard to describe without putting into words just because of how absurd and bonkers it is. But it's one that is so stupid that I can't help but recommend it. It feels like one of those screenplays that, like, a pretentious filmmaker comes up with and they're like, oh my god, this is so genius, especially the twist itself. It's something that, like, in their head is so genius, but then you watch it and you're like, this is really, really stupid, and it's really dumb, but oh my god, did I get a real kick out of it. So, C for Serenity. Again, really stupid film. Really terrible overall. I know some people that really hated this movie. But trust me, if you're in the right mindset and you watch this with you know, a couple of friends, I think you'll have just such an amazing time watching it. Maybe even be a little bit inebriated as well, because that'll also add to it. Amazing, amazing stuff for sure. Definitely one of the dumbest films of last year. Maybe the dumbest film of last year. I don't know. Phanatic and Serenity kind of flip around for me as to which one is dumber. But thankfully, while those two films that I want to be guilty pleasures didn't deliver, I got my fix with these two. This is definitely absolutely glorious and way funnier than I was expecting. Wounds is the definition of just a giant waste of time. This is a film that is constantly building, and it's building, and it's building, and you're expecting it to go somewhere, and where does it go? Fucking nowhere. I'll just tell you that right off the bat. This film goes absolutely fucking nowhere, and there's so many things that just don't make any sense in this film. The whole film, you're kind of just confused as to, like, what's really going on. You know, you have this guy, and he you know, finds this phone that was, like, left behind, and all this weird stuff starts to happen to him, and you don't understand what's really happening here. And as a result, you have a film that you're just completely alienated by, and it's not intriguing, and it's not, you know, weird in the sense where, like, you're intrigued by it. Like, no, you're turned off by it because the film is not answering anything. It doesn't seem like, and it doesn't feel like it's one of those films where it's trying to be ambiguous. Like, no, it legitimately does not feel like they have an answer. It feels like they had a concept here, but they just had no idea where to go with it, and it really does show for sure. And Armie Hammer, this is an actor that I really do like, but he's very 50-50 in this film. There are some scenes where he's really good. He does a good job with playing this guy that is clearly going insane, and he's getting more and more increasingly stressed as the film goes on. But anytime you have a scene with him in a bar, I don't know what he was doing, but it's really bad. He's really over the top. He's really overdoing it, and it just did not work at all. And Armie Hammer's an actor that in general is pretty 50-50 for me, but I feel like he's been really good recently. This very much ends the streak for sure. Dakota Johnson is really good in this film, aside from the fact that, you know, despite the fact that she really doesn't have much to do here, very much at all. It really does feel like she's only here because she's a named actress, and they needed to get her. And then Zazie Beetz' character doesn't really serve much of a purpose either. And like I said, just the way this film ends was so infuriating to me. I found myself so annoyed with what was going on. There's not a single moment that scared me. And I do think the premise of this is intriguing, but they did absolutely nothing to really make this work. I found this to be such a boring and alienating film that really took me out of it very fast. Definite D+ for Wounds. Probably one of the most unsatisfying films of last year. It's definitely not one of the worst, but it's definitely one of the most unsatisfying. It's a film that I really hated more the more it went on. Haunt is a bit of a weird one because I think this film is incredibly creative. I think there's a lot of really great kills here. I really enjoyed what they ended up doing, you know, structure-wise and things like that. But I didn't really care about any of these characters. None of them really stuck out all that much to me. The main one they tried to flesh out a little bit more than I was expecting them to, and they do a good job with that, and all the acting here is pretty good. Like, I don't think anyone did a bad job or anything. Like, Katie Stevens is a really good lead, and she gives a really, you know, solid performance. And I really did like all of the acting here. Again, I just think it really lacks in story, and because they're just really isn't much of one. You have these characters, and they're at a Halloween party, and they decide to go to a haunted house, and then the haunted house starts to turn against them. But the thing is, the movie is so damn entertaining to the point where I can't really get that mad at it. Like, I still had a good time with this movie. I still was enjoying what I was watching. I thought the kills were really well done. I thought that the scares were really creative. I thought there was a lot to really enjoy here. It's just one of those films that really does fall flat in terms of characters for me. And while that normally would be a big deal, I like everything so much here that I can overall recommend this one. I do think that there is some really good stuff here for sure. It's not a must-watch or anything, but it's the perfect film where if you need a good, like, horror movie to watch, just randomly, put on Haunt, and I think you'll be entertained by it. B- for this one. Again, I can't give it a hugely fresh rating because it really does lack in terms of character, but in terms of scares, which there were definitely some that had me on edge, and some really creative kills and a really interesting premise, it overall did deliver for me. So B- for Haunt. Paradise Hills is very frustrating for me because there is a lot that I actually really do like here. Most of the performances are really good. Emma Roberts does a really good job in anchoring this film. You really are kind of with her throughout most of it. You're just as confused as to what's going on, but you're also just as intrigued as what's going on as well. The rest of the cast I thought also did a solid job. Mila Jovovich I even thought wasn't too bad here. Now look, she's not good or anything, but compared to Mila Jovovich standards, she's actually not too bad here. Like, this is a role that is serviceable for her. This is the kind of role that she can do and is not as bad. So she's tolerable in this movie. That's the best way to sum it up. So that's definitely a plus for sure. And aesthetically, I mean, it's pretty much flawless. This definitely is some of the best cinematography of the entire year. There's so many creative and just beautiful shots, and just this world overall is one that I think is so interesting to look at, and there's so much stuff that I do like there, and there's a lot of questions that the movie throws you that are actually very intriguing, and you wonder a lot about what's going on. And then we get to the film's twist, and that's really what brings this entire film down for me, because while watching it, you begin to realize it's one of those movies where you're not really going to know how you feel until the actual ending happens. And once we get to that ending, it's extremely unsatisfying. It really is a terrible twist that really just sinks the entire film, and I honestly kind of hate it, not just because it's very clearly just ripping off a much better film that came out earlier in 2019, but it also just doesn't feel like this is where the movie was going. Like, the chips do not fit into place in the way that they should. And the ending especially, while it's built as like something very uplifting, there's some very dark implications that I don't think the film is really cognizant of. And I don't think the filmmakers themselves were very cognizant of. Like, they needed to really think about like what the ending actually implies, because it's not really a happy one. It's really not. There's a lot of things, especially with the way it ends, it just makes things so much more overcomplicated, and it just doesn't really work at all. So again, while there are things I like here, aesthetically and performance-wise, the film is really good, that ending just really ruined the entire thing for me, and it really just made the entire experience so much more frustrating in that way, because I think this could have been something really interesting. I think the film earlier on, it had a lot to say about, like, identity and choices that, and, fates and things like that. But at the end of the day, it just really made me feel very cold in the end. And I wanted a lot more from it for sure. So I'd give this one a C. It's not a terrible movie, but it's one that was definitely, I think, ruined by its pretty awful twist for sure. The Report is really good. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. Adam Driver is obviously really good here. Really, all the cast does a very strong job. But the actual plot of this, I think, is very interesting. The idea that there are these documents that are, exposing these sort of torture methods that the certain government agents and things like that, that they have in fact tried to legalize, and just the inhumane things they're doing. It's so disgusting to think about. I'm like, yes, we know what waterboarding is, but seeing the lengths that they went to in this film, the just overall, just so much cruel and unusual punishment. It's really does turn your stomach for sure. And that's the thing this film does really well. It really does inform you in that way. And I think they definitely did a really good job with it. There's a lot of, like I said, really strong acting in this movie for sure. And seeing how Adam Driver's character, how he gets wrapped up with all of this, I thought was definitely very well done. Everyone really does do a good job. I do think there are some aspects that are a bit underwritten. There's a lot of jumping forward in time, and there are things that they kind of skip around that I would have actually really liked to have seen play out a little bit more. I think the film could have been a little bit longer, maybe like 2 hours or something like that. It's just short of 2 hours, but I think it actually need to be a little bit over 2 hours to really become an amazing film. Also, there are some characters that just kind of are dropped off, particularly Sarah Goldberg's character. I was really liking her, and then the film just says, well, we don't know what to do with her, so she's gone. No real reason, she just left. And I understood the reasoning why, like, her character ended up leaving when she did. That wasn't really the problem. It was more just, I felt there was a little bit more to explore with some of these characters, and that was definitely a little bit disappointing. But overall, I really did enjoy this one. I think it's a fascinating watch for sure. It's one that is going to inform you about some things that you may have known about, but may have not known the full extent of, and I think that alone is enough a reason to watch it. So, B for the report. Definitely really solid for sure. Arctic Dogs is basically what you expect. This is essentially a direct-to-DVD animated film that came into theaters, and it very much does feel like one. However, the thing you're probably not expecting is how fucking boring this is. I mean, the plot of this movie is just not something I think that's really going to appeal to kids. The main sort of conflict that the character is that Jeremy Renner's like character is dealing with, I just don't think people are going to be all that interested in. It's all about like there's like this devious plan where like they're going to try to drill beneath the Arctic surface to like melt ice and things like that, and it isn't really something I think kids are going to be all that interested in. And him, Swifty the Fox working like this delivery service. But also, a lot of the characters here are just not very good at all. Our main character, he's just your typical sort of like troublemaker that's like trying to go up the ranks, but he keeps like fucking it up, and we see him like starting to gradually start to get closer to that position. And Jeremy Renner's like fine in the movie. Like, I actually didn't think he was too bad. Like, for a movie that is really dumb, he actually is trying here. He actually is putting a lot into this performance to the point where every single song on the soundtrack, and I mean every song, is a Jeremy Renner song. It's very awkward for sure. It's a very strange choice, but hey, he's passionate about it, so I'll give him that. It might be one of his last movies ever because of the whole custody dispute, but whatever. That's irrelevant to this whole thing. Alec Baldwin I actually didn't think was too bad either, despite the fact that the character he's playing does not fit his voice at all. I mean, really, really bad choice. I watched this with, like, a bunch of friends, like, online. I kept, like, joking them, like, guys, this is literally, like, a prequel to Norm of the North, because it looks like almost the exact same animation to Norm of the North and things like that. Heidi Klum, though, is fucking atrocious. And I mean, what would you expect? She's not an actress, and you really do see here that she really can't act at all. There's no chemistry between her and Jeremy Renner. Her accent goes in and out throughout the entire movie, and it's just really bad. Also really bad, surprisingly, is Angelica Houston. I thought she was awful in this movie, and I usually like her quite a bit, but I thought that she was terrible here. It just really did not seem like she cared. Neither did John Cleese. I mean, just a lot of these actors just were not well casted here very much at all. They're really just here for name recognition and really just reasons to put the movie in theaters. Again, the animation's atrocious. It's what you expect. It's not as bad, like I said, as I think it could have been, but it's certainly a really bad movie for sure. It definitely is one of the worst animated films of last year, and you can tell why. I mean, this was one of the biggest, like, box office animation bombs of all time. Not the biggest. That honor goes to, like, Playmobil the movie or Delgo or something like that. but it's certainly in the conversation. Not just because it came out on like the worst week, but it just should not have come into theaters at all. Like, this should have been a movie that went right to Netflix. I don't know why it came into theaters. Nobody saw it. You probably didn't see it either, and you're not missing much. D for Arctic Dogs. Again, not the absolute disaster I thought it was going to be, but goddamn, it's still pretty terrible for sure. Hala, I actually did like a lot more than I was expecting to, and a big reason for that is the main star here. Geraldine Viswanathan is so great in this role. I've loved her since Blockers, and she definitely shows here just how dynamic of an actor she really can be. She really elevates the material. She really anchors this entire film, and I think is easily the best thing about it. And the film's commentary on, like, people who are Muslim but don't necessarily feel like they should be, I think is actually really well done. I think the way we dive deep into this culture and things like that, that's something that I really did appreciate. And her relationship with her parents is also really interesting because her mother is a little bit more understanding towards some of her beliefs, but her father really isn't, even though he knows English and her mother doesn't, which I found to be very interesting. And her father has this other thing that he's been involved in, which I didn't really care about as much, but the stuff between her parents I thought was very interesting. The film does have two major issues for me that do bring it down significantly. One is that I just did not care about the romance in this film. The main romance that she has, I just found to be very generic, and I felt like there was a lot more you could have done with this film than just have it be this romance. And thankfully, it's not the whole film, but it's a good portion of it. And I felt like they could have not necessarily taking it out, but just make it a little bit more interesting than just, oh, she's going for this white guy, and it's only because she's Muslim, and he's not someone that is Muslim like her father and mother wanted. You know, it's a little bit different. And I like the message the film has of, like, going against the grain and doing your own thing, but I think at points it's a little bit too on the nose. And then for the majority of the film, she has this really interesting relationship with her English teacher. He really respects her writing. He really likes her. And then there's this weird moment where she takes it in an almost romantic direction, and that whole subplot felt entirely pointless. I did not understand what the point of it was in this film. It didn't go into the problematic direction I was expecting it to, because I was really worried for a little bit. But I just found it to be very pointless, and overall, like I said, I think this is a good film. I think there's a lot of things it does do right. I think Geraldine Viswanathan is really good. I think the way it explores certain themes is really good. And for the first Apple TV Plus movie, it's not a bad start. I do think it could have been a little bit better, but overall, I still enjoyed it. I give this one a B-. I think definitely it does a lot of things right, but there are some things that are a bit underwritten, I think could have made it a little bit better overall. But like I said, Viswanathan really does elevate this entire thing and really makes it, I think, a really good film for sure that I think more people need to check out. So, Jumanji: The Next Level. I was planning on doing a full review for this, but unfortunately, I just ran out of time, so I figured I'd just put in this catch-up review. I really enjoyed the sequel quite a bit. I think it did a good job with retaining the things that made the previous film work, but also doing its own thing. And I think they did that really well here, especially the role reversals, and not just the role reversals, but the different roles that Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart are doing. I mean, they just absolutely nail it, and Kevin Hart especially is absolutely the big scene stealer of this film. Jack Black was it in the first one. Kevin Hart is definitely it in this one. He had me laughing hysterically throughout the entire thing. I thought he was so great in this film, and it's one of those things where I kept waiting for it to wear off and get tiring, and I heard people say it does, but for me, it really didn't. I was laughing pretty much consistently throughout the entire film, and I thought Dwayne Johnson as Danny DeVito as well was such a great choice. I really love what they did there, and Jack Black as well. Yes, he is playing the black dude, but that's kind of the point, and I think the joke itself worked really well, and it just showed how great of an actor Jack Black really is, how well he's able to get into that, but then eventually go back into the Bethany role. I mean, he just nails it so well, and I was so impressed by what he ended up doing there. And the actual story that Danny DeVito and Danny Glover are going through, I thought was actually really touching. There's, you know, sort of there's sort of a unresolved tension going on between them because of something that happened a few years back, and they haven't spoken to each other for a while because of it, and it could have felt very contrived, but I actually thought it was really well handled. There's one scene especially that I actually thought was really sweet, and I thought they did a really good job with handling it for sure. And Aquafina, she comes in very late into this film, but I thought she was also a really good addition. I really like what she brought to the table here. So yeah, there's a lot that I really enjoy about this film. The action I thought was even a little bit better at points. The only thing that really does bring it down for me is what they choose to do with some of the secondary characters, particularly Bethany. It takes her forever to enter the story, and when she does, while it does work, there's a certain choice that her and Colin Hanks make, and I just did not think that it worked. It just didn't make much sense in hindsight at all. There are drastic implications that could happen to Colin Hanks if he, goes in this direction, if he decides to make this choice. But he does, and it doesn't necessarily hurt the film, but it is something that, if you think about it too hard, you're really going to dislike it, and it may lower the film for you overall. But like I said, it's so entertaining. The cast is still so great. They have such great chemistry. There's so many great action sequences that it's very hard to dislike this one. I had a really great time with it. I like it pretty much just as much as I do the first one, so definitely I'd give this one a B. I think there's a really great message, especially about the importance of friendship, but also about abandonment and how much closer all of them have gotten, and how they really are friends now and things like that, and how you need to try to stay as close with them as possible and not lose touch. You need to try to hold on to those that matter to you, and I think there's a really good message about that there. So overall, I had a really good time with this one. Like I said, definitely a really solid sequel for sure. All right, Greener Grass is a film that I really, really wish I did an in-depth review for. Out of all the movies I'm talking about on this list, this is the one that I really wish I got to talk about more, because I fucking adored this film. Look, is this film weird? Absolutely. Is the humor in this film not going to be for everyone? Yes. It's very dry. It's very absurd. It's downright just so zany and just bonkers, and there's so many things that I think are going to annoy some people, but all those things I think are going to annoy some people is exactly why I love it. The humor here, I think, is genius. I was laughing hysterically in this film, and just the mundanity of it all. I mean, the whole film, you have this community of people that are just so nice to each other, and you can tell it's just so fake. Anytime that something bad is happening, they don't yell, they don't scream, and they get mad at the most ridiculous shit. I mean, there's a scene where the main character's son calls her a word that really isn't that bad. He calls her like a bus or something like that. And that whole scene, just the reaction that these parents have, I mean, you would think he called her like a bitch or something like that. Like, I thought stuff like that was just absolutely hysterical to me. The fact that they are all like driving golf carts, and the fact that they all wear braces. I mean, there's a lot of great symbolism there, but the thing that really struck me with this film is that it's a lot deeper than I was expecting. The film really has a lot to say about the dangers of conformity, and I know a lot of films recently have touched upon that, but this film does it in a much different way. You have this woman that is living in this society where everyone is the same, everyone acts the same, everyone wants to be the same, to the point where she's okay with like giving up her baby in like the first scene, and then that same woman that takes her baby is like, she wants to look like she's pregnant even though she's not, so like she's like using this football as like a baby, and everyone believes her. So yeah, there's a lot of wackiness going on, but it does have a lot to say about how we should all try to be individual, and how we should not just do things because everyone else is. I mean, the main character in this film, there are points where she has to consult her little like mom squad about everything, every little thing, even things like, should I break up with my husband? Because her and her husband's relationship is kind of on the rocks, but it can easily be worked out. But because they say she needs to divorce him, then she does. I mean, just little things like that. The certain decisions that she makes, they're rarely decisions that she makes for herself. And her whole arc in the movie, I found, was so intriguing, especially the ending, which, while really funny, is actually really dark. And if you really think about it, this film is actually really dark. There's a lot of dark themes about it, and I really did appreciate that for sure. I thought this film was absolutely genius. I can understand, like I said, if some people just do not like it at all. I mean, again, there's literally a scene where their son turns into a dog, and he is a dog throughout the rest of the movie, but every single thing that's weird, I feel like there's a purpose to it. I didn't feel like it was just weird because it wanted to be different. I didn't feel that way. I felt like there was definitely an underlining meaning to it all that I think you can really dissect, and it's a film that I really do respect for sure. This is just definitely one of my favorites of the entire year. It's certainly one of the funniest films of the entire year, but also one of the most insightful that I don't think is getting nearly enough attention. Definitely big recommend for Greener Grass. A for sure. Definitely one of my favorites of the year. In Fabric is a film I desperately want to like because, one, I love the originality of it all. I love the idea that it's not like a demon or something like that. It's a dress that is trying to kill you. And it's not just by, coming up to you and like stabbing you and things like that. It's by you purchasing the dress and, it starts to have like a physical effect on you. I think it's such a cool idea. There's so much you can do with that. And for the first, I want to say like 40 minutes, I was kind of digging it. I like the idea that this woman buys this dress, even though she knows it does not fit her. She's just coerced into thinking that this is the dress for her. And then everything starts to go downhill pretty much. And I think the commentary on like capitalism and consumerism is really good. The film does a really good job with that. There's a lot of really weird and out there scenes. I think that the things that the dress does, especially, is very interesting. And then it takes a turn. And once it takes a turn, it goes in a completely different direction that I just wasn't really down for. And the film pretty much lost me after that. And it's not because of the fact that the film switches things and, oh, I didn't like that. It's the thing that it was switching I just didn't care about, and I just didn't find to be very interesting at all. And it really did, like I said, take me out of it. And I also felt that it was super rushed, because once you realize what this film really is, you begin to like it a lot less. You begin to realize where it's going to go, and where it goes is fairly predictable. The ending itself is one that I really did not like very much at all, and just overall, I saw a lot of potential in this movie. I think that the acting is really good for the most part, especially the main girl. I thought she definitely did do a really good job, and Gwendolyn Christie is really great here too. But just overall, I just wasn't really that big of a fan of this one. I thought there was a lot more that it could have done. I thought there was way more that it could have explored. And in the end, it just didn't really do that much for me. I appreciate it a lot. I love the score. I love the cinematography. I like a lot of the acting. But overall, as a film, I just found myself a bit underwhelmed. So I'd give this one like a C+. I think there's a lot that it could have done, but definitely one of the weaker, I think, A24 horror features this year. So, Reign of the Superman, I reviewed Death of the Superman last year. I really love that film a lot. This film, I don't think is quite as good. Now, don't get me wrong. It is really, really good. There's a lot of things I love here, especially the character that Cameron Monaghan plays. I thought he was great. I loved this character, and easily my favorite storyline in the movie is the stuff between him and Lex Luthor. The fact that he is, Superboy. He's supposed to be, someone that is taking over for Superman, and he's supposed to be completely obedient to Lex, but he's very much going against the grain. There's a lot of things that he is starting to learn. He was a creation of Lex's, but he starts to become more and more human as the film goes on, and I thought his character was easily the most intriguing of the entire film, and I thought they did a really good job with that, and that's something I really did appreciate. And this film also serves as kind of a redemption arc for Lex Luthor, which I thought was also well done. I enjoyed the way that was played out. I thought they did a good job there, and there's a lot of other things I do like as well. I like that, we see how a world is without Superman, and how there's all these different sort of, figures out there that want to be the next Superman and feel like it is their destiny to do so. And I think they did a good job with that for sure. Lois Lane's grief, I thought, was well explored, but not as well explored as I would have wanted to be. I did love her friendship with Wonder Woman, though. That was very unexpected. I was not, thinking they were going to go in that direction, but I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I thought it worked really well. So what are my problems with this film? Well, my biggest one is that I think way too early on, we are given an indication that Superman is coming back and that he is not dead. There's a way to bring him back, and I think that lessens some of the impact. I would have actually liked it. I know that it's short, it's supposed to be an animated film, but I would have actually liked it if we spent at least a good 30 to 40 minutes feeling like this is it. Like, we have to kind of go on without Superman. Kind of like how, and this is a weird comparison, kind of like how something like Endgame, where they really take the time to show you the drastic, the drastic repercussions that this has had on the world. I would have liked to see that with this film, and it's very much glossed over. Very early on, we get the sense that there is someone else out there, and that there is a way to bring back Superman, and I thought they could have done a better job with that. And as far as the antagonist goes, I thought that the main antagonist, I thought, was really strong, but it just felt a little bit forced in that way. Not his motivation. His motivation is really good, but who ends up being the antagonist, it just felt a little bit forced to me. Like, they just needed this epic climax, and the climax itself I really did appreciate for sure. But I just felt there were some aspects of this film that just felt a little bit underwritten to me. And to me personally, I don't think this film worked as an 80-minute movie. I think it needs to be a lot longer than that. I think there was way more they could have gotten into for sure. But overall, I still really did enjoy this one. I still overall was satisfied by it. I just felt that it could have been an even better conclusion overall. So I give this one like a B. I don't think it's as good as Death of Superman, but definitely still a solid conclusion for sure. The Death of Dick Lawn is the definition of a film that I can totally see why people are not really talking about, because it's really out there, and that's to be expected from one of the two Daniels from Swiss Army Man. Yes, I know, they're not the Daniel brothers. I mixed that up in my original review. We can move past that, but regardless, I love that we finally have one of them, doing a movie again. It's great to see, and I like that, similar to Swiss Army Man, he just goes for it, because the movie starts off and there's this mystery that's going on, and you think it's going to be pretty straightforward. Like, maybe they were murdered or something, maybe Dick was murdered or something like that. But you always know that something's going on. There's something that these two guys are hiding, because they were friends with him. They know what happened the previous night, but they're, doing everything they can to cover their tracks. And I will just say right now, the way that Dick was murdered is not what you're expecting at all. And that is going to be the thing that I think makes or breaks this movie for people. Me, I fucking loved it. I really appreciate the direction that they went in. It was weird, it was different, but I thought it was really well executed. And the way the film does it, it actually takes it pretty seriously. It actually works really well, and it's a weird direction for sure. It's one where on paper it sounds really stupid, but it actually really does work, and you can understand why what happened in the film, and I thought they did a really good job with that. It's also just a ton of fun. I mean, the main character's friend had me in stitches throughout the entire movie. There's one scene especially with him in a restaurant and him being increasingly frustrated over this one condiment that is at the restaurant. I thought was brilliant, and I thought it was probably one of the funniest moments that I had seen last year. I've never really seen this guy in much of anything. A lot of these actors, in fact, I haven't really seen them in much of anything, but they all were really good, and I really did appreciate them for sure. Even the little girl who plays his daughter, I thought was a really good child actor. I enjoyed her a lot for sure. And what I also really liked about the movie is that you come to realize, I think, about, when the twist happens, it's not really about the murder. It's more about how this is going to affect this guy's marriage, and how the marriage that he has isn't really as, sacred as you think it is. There's a lot that these two are hiding from each other. There's a lot that is going on that is affecting them, and there's a lot that he especially hasn't told her, and I really loved where they end up going with it. It was pretty bittersweet. It went in a direction that I wasn't expecting, and I really did appreciate that. Really, my only flaws with this movie is that, a couple things. One, there is a character that is introduced very early on, and then she just kind of disappears. And I felt like there was a lot more that they could have done with her. I really liked what we got of this character overall, and I would have liked to see more of her. I think that she was very underused in the movie, and it wasn't in the sense where, oh, she was only in it for a little bit and then she disappears. No, I felt like there was a lot of untapped potential with her, especially with her relation to another character. I think they could have done more there. And I think that overall would have made the film even better. Also, I do think that the film in the second half does meander a little bit. I think there are some points where, there are some things that go on just a little bit too long, and I think they could have handled that a bit better. But overall, I enjoyed this film immensely. I really appreciate just how different it was. I thought it was pretty funny, but also a lot more insightful than I was expecting. It's downright hysterical at times, but it also goes in a really weird direction, and it's definitely not for everyone. I'll say that right now. It's definitely not for everyone. I can understand if someone is weirded out by this movie, but for me, I thought it worked really well. I am definitely going to be out there to see whatever the Daniels are, or one of the Daniels, whoever the Daniels are, whatever they're going to be doing next, definitely. And I enjoyed this one quite a bit. So A minus for Death of Dick Lawn. Again, not for everyone, but one that I really ended up loving. Wild Rose I enjoyed a lot, and for a lot of different reasons. Look, I'll say right off the bat, is this a movie we've seen before? Yes, but I think there's a lot of stuff that this film does differently than your average film about a girl wanting to become, an artist in that way, because what we see this character go through, it feels far more realistic. It feels much more raw. There's not a lot about this movie that feels very cinematic. She has this dream where, yes, she wants to be a country star, but there's a lot of other stuff that she's facing. She is recently gotten out of prison. She is, babysitting and things like that, but she's babysitting to, because she needs to have money to provide for her children. She has a mother that she's frequently clashing with. I mean, things are not great for her. She's kind of in this lie right now where the girl that she's working for doesn't know about most of that. And, there's a lot more going on besides that. And Jessie Buckley is maybe the best I've ever seen her. I thought she was so good in this movie, and if it wasn't such a packed year, I'd definitely say she'd give one of the best performances of the entire year, because I thought she completely anchored this film, but also just the journey that this character goes on. I mean, she starts off and she's so convinced that, like, the place that she lives in isn't where she's supposed to be. Like, she has these dreams that people in, Scotland just normally don't. That's not something that normally would happen. People in her town just don't really feel that way most of the time. She's stuck in Glasgow, and she feels like she's stuck there, but I like that it's a film about her coming to appreciate that. And the song that everyone talks about, yes, it really is that good. And I love the whole story that is crazy. Like, the way Mary Steenburgen wrote that amidst, like, brain surgery and just, like, immediately came up with that song, I think is a crazy story, but oh my god, is it so good. And I really hope it does get a Best Original Song nomination, because all the songs here are great, but that's easily the best part of this movie for sure. Um, but then the rest of the movie, I think, is also really great. I think there's a lot of things that it does a good job with. Really, my only flaw is that I think there is one relationship that just, it's resolved, but it's resolved off screen. And I would have liked to actually see it get a little bit more closure overall, because something really drastic happens, and it really does affect this relationship, but then apparently the film kind of tells you everything's fine at the end. And I feel like they could have done a better job of wrapping that up. But overall, I enjoyed this film immensely. I think it's a really well done music drama, and definitely different from most. I think it's definitely worth checking out for sure. A minus for Wild Rose. Had a really, really good time with this one, but definitely, again, it's not like a feel-good movie or anything. Like, yes, it definitely has feel-good moments, but it's far, far more raw than you're expecting, and I really appreciate that for sure. Another great film involving music, Her Smell. Now, this one, unlike Wild Rose, really isn't about the music at all. In fact, the music is kind of the film's villain in a way, where we have this woman, and the way that the story is told is not what I was really expecting. It's not really, it is a linear narrative, but it's only done in 5 scenes, and they're all at different points in this character's life. But I thought it worked really well, actually. seeing her and this constant, like this terrible addiction that she has, and how throughout the most of the first half of the movie she's heavily like inebriated and things like that, and you can see how it's really affecting her, and it's very devastating to watch. And Elizabeth Moss, oh my god, is she amazing here. This is easily one of her best performances for sure. I mean, especially the way she just shows how unhinged and just how just how troubled this character is, and you see how this is really affecting her, how throughout the movie she really starts to go through this, starts to become worse and worse. Her condition gets worse throughout the movie, and you can see how this has effect on her bandmates and things like that. It's ruined, her relationship. She doesn't have as good a relation with her daughter, but it really is about her coming to find herself, finding ways to kick the habits, but what the film does, like, viscerally, is fantastic. You are on edge throughout this entire film. When Moss is, like, yelling and things like that, I mean, it's hard to explain just how much of an experience this film really is, and it's definitely not going to be for everyone, especially because the way that Moss acts throughout the first two, and maybe the first three scenes in the movie, is going to be hard for some, because it's a very realistic depiction. I mean, she acts like someone that is just completely helpless, and someone that is just so heavily affected by what she's doing to herself that she isn't herself. She's not acting rational at all. She's downright just, out of her, she is downright just out of her mind, and you really do get to see that throughout the film. There's so many hard moments to watch here, but it all builds up to something that is very satisfying, and I don't want to spoil what ends up happening in, like, the other two scenes in the movie, but I thought it was very satisfying for sure. I really like what they end up doing here. Really, my only thing is that because the film is only 5 scenes, there are some things that just don't feel as well developed as they could have, particularly her relation between her and her mother. I felt like they could have dived into that a little bit more. The relation between her and some of her bandmates, some of them, like the stuff with her and Gail Rankin, is great. It's very well fleshed out, but some of her bandmates, they don't feel like they're as well fleshed out as they could have been. I felt that the first 3 scenes were really well paced, and then the last two I didn't feel were as well were as well paced as they could have been, and I just wanted a little bit more there overall. But for the most part, I really love this one quite a bit. I think it's definitely really different for sure, and Moss's performance alone is enough for reason to watch it. It's not going to be for everyone, but I definitely really was impressed by this one for sure. B plus for her smell. Definitely really, really appreciate this one. Pain and Glory is great. This is definitely, I think, the big comeback that Antonio Banderas needed, and I love this one quite a bit. It's a really good look into this, filmmaker and him kind of starting to fade out, but also his personal life and how his personal life is imbued in many of his films and things like that, and seeing the trauma that he's gone through, the fact that he knew that he was gay throughout most of his life, but it wasn't accepted, and that he had this very complicated relationship with his mother and things like that, and they were very, she was very devoted to him, all that kind of stuff, and that he holds that very near and dear to him, but also that there's a lot of things that happened in his past that he just isn't, that is very unresolved. One relationship especially that I thought was very well fleshed out. This was just a really insightful film, much more than I would have expected. I think it goes into the creative process really well. I think it dives into this man's life really well, and Antonio Banderas is just such a fantastic performance here. It's very internal. It's not a very showy performance, but what he does here is truly masterful, and I can definitely see why he is getting the recognition that he is, because he has some really great work here. He totally transforms this character that has, like, so many diseases as well. Like, any disease you can think of, this guy probably has. I mean, I don't know how he lived that long, to be honest, because holy shit, this guy was like a mess. but he does a really good job of respecting this filmmaker, whose films I really do want to watch at some point, and the way it ends especially, I thought was a very interesting way to wrap things up. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. Bong Joon-ho recently said something that, like, people need to start supporting foreign films more, and this is definitely one to check out. Another one I'm going to be reviewing in an individual review very soon, you should also check out, but this is definitely one. It's in theaters now, it's in a more wider expansion. Don't miss out on this one, guys. It's pretty great. Definite A- for Pain and Glory. And the final film that I'm going to be reviewing in this gargantuan catch-up review, we end no better way than with a gargantuan film, Dragged Across Concrete. A movie that I have been trying endlessly to watch all year. And it's not because I didn't want to watch it, it's because of the runtime. It's very long, and I needed to set aside time to watch it. And every single, like, Monday, I was like, I'm going to watch this, I'm finally going to commit to it, but then I had to review Watchmen or Mr. Robot. I just never had time to watch it until now, and it's unfortunate because I fucking love this movie, and that should not be a surprise to you because I've loved S. Craig Zahler's previous two films. I've loved them dearly. I mean, yes, and here's the thing I always appreciate them. Yes, they're ultra-violent. Yes, they can be offensive to some, but they always do have a purpose. It's not just being violent for the sake of being violent. There's always a commentary in there. And Dragged Across Concrete is no different. Now, admittedly, this has been the most, like, controversial of any of his films, and I can definitely see why, in a sense, but I don't really feel like it deserves the controversy, because, yes, the main two characters here are not necessarily good people. They are corrupted cops. These are not at all good cops, but the film is not condoning what they're doing. They make it very clear that, like, these guys are wrong, and that they're in over their head, because this video goes, this video ends up being recorded of them going way too far with this drug dealer and his girlfriend, and that ends up getting them suspended, and now they're kind of going on this mission to, to try to track down the person that took the video and get them to erase it. They think it's going to be this very easy sort of just like spy mission, but clearly there's more going on, and, the film does a really good job with setting that up and showing how these two individuals really do feel and how they don't really feel like they're in the wrong. But we also have these two criminals who are involved with that drug dealer and his girlfriend, and they have their own reason for what they're doing. They're not necessarily good people either, and that's the thing I've always appreciated about S. Craig Zahler, is that he's not a black and white director. He doesn't have good or bad people in his films. He has people that are pretty much neutral in that way. Because, again, yes, the two characters are very much racist, and the film does make that very clear, but they also get you to understand, what they're going through, why they're in this situation. Mel Gibson is in this situation where his daughter doesn't feel safe, and she's being, she's in a very tumultuous environment, and he's trying to move them out of there. And then you have Vince Vaughn, who he just really wants to try to take this time to propose to his girlfriend, and things like that. And then you also have Tori Kittle's character, who he has this handicapped brother, and he has this mother that is whoring herself out because they're not very financially stable, and he wants to use this money that, this drug dealer has in an effort to pay for his brother's, medical bills and that kind of thing. So the film gives you a lot of time to really dive into everything, and that's what I really appreciate about Dragged Across Concrete, is that it's definitely his most slow-paced film yet. It's very ponderous. It really lets you sink into what's going on. It really gives you time to process everything. So then once the craziness goes down, because I will say, for a while, this film is actually pretty tame compared to his other films. It is still violent, but not to the level of Brawl in Cell Block 99 or Bone Tomahawk. It's definitely his most toned down in terms of violence, and it's, again, very purposeful. The film does get pretty grisly towards the end. The last 40 minutes are insane, as to be expected in an S. Craig Zahler film, but at no point
does it feel like he is actively trying to pick a side here. He doesn't try to make one better than the other, because if he did, then it'd be like, oh, we're supposed to be siding with these characters, and that could become problematic because of things they're involved in. So he keeps it pretty neutral. And I think by doing that, he provokes a very interesting social commentary, not just on race, because that's obviously a big part of it, and on police brutality, how, you know, what is such a thing as going too far, or are they just following the law? That's a continuing debate a lot of people have had for years, and this film really does a good job to kind of start a conversation about that. But it really, I think, is about excess and this power that we have and how it's corrupting these individuals, how they feel that they are unstoppable. Both of them do. Both of them feel like they're going to get out of this, and everything's going to be fine. And they're very in over their head in that way. They're ready to, you know, face their worst, and even doing so, they are still very much caught off guard. And I think the film has a lot to say about that. And the performances here, I mean, they're all fantastic. Mel Gibson especially is the best he's been in quite some time. Vince Vaughn gives another very strong performance here, although don't expect this to be like Brawl in Cell Block 99. This is a much more toned down performance than that, but still, he's really great here. Tory Kittles as well. Not enough people are talking about him. He is fantastic in this film. I loved what he did here. Really, in terms of flaws, I don't really have too many. There is, you know, there are some characters that I think aren't as well fleshed out as they could have been. Jennifer Carpenter, especially. She comes in very late into the film, and I think it actually would have been cool if there was an entire subplot of her, and maybe this character we don't really see the relevance of, and then towards the end, when her storyline finally, you know, comes into play, we finally see the relevance of this character. I actually would have liked it if they did something like that, and I did feel that every so often the film did drag, but for the most part, I really love this one quite a bit, and it maybe has his best ending yet. I really would have to think about it, but the ending of this movie is pretty masterful. It's one that leaves you with a lot of questions. It has a lot of great symbolism to it, and it's one that I absolutely adore. This was definitely worth the wait. I wish I got around to it a lot sooner, because I would have loved to do a more like in-depth review for it. But definitely an A for Dragged Across Concrete for sure. I don't think it's like one of the best of the year, but it'll for sure be in my honorable mentions for sure. I absolutely adored this one. Oh man, that was a lot to get through for sure. But if you guys are still watching, I very much appreciate it. I know there was a lot of movies to talk about, but like I said, I hadn't done a catch review in a while. I knew I had to do one before I did my best and worst list, which both of those will be coming very soon. I got a few more movie reviews to do, and then my best list will be out, and my worst list will actually be the next video I do, so you guys can look forward to that. Either way, guys, of course, as always, comment down below, let me know what you guys think of any of these movies that I talked about. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.